Hello, I'm Sarah Butcher, and welcome to a brand new episode of Tales of the Extraordinary, the podcast series which delves into each guest's origin story and shares some of the highs and lows they've overcome on the way, making each career journey and energy as unique and individual as they are. This one-off special is part of Xodus Pride Month celebrations, dedicated to spotlighting our company's supportive, diverse, and inclusive culture, as well as providing a platform to check in on any barriers we can help individuals overcome through awareness and education. Joining me today is Pete Tipler, Xodus's Strategic Director and X Academy's Managing Director, based in London. I've had the pleasure of knowing Pete as a friend and colleague after we both started our careers in the UK environment team a good few years ago now. Pete is an innovator that has an enthusiasm for life. He is loyal and caring, and over the years has been a great friend and boss to me. He is also a husband, a dog lover, and camper van owner. Hello, Pete. Welcome to our Tales of the Extraordinary, the Pride edition.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, I think it's important for me to say thank you to you because this can and is quite a vulnerable subject. So thank you so much for trusting us with telling your story.
Hopefully I can bring forward some perspectives that clearly are it's a very important topic for me. And hopefully that comes across. And I'm just looking forward to discussing the topics with you.
Well, brilliant. We will be sticking to our Tales of the Extraordinary format, but we will be putting a Pride lens on it. So I will jump in with our first question, which is, why energy?
Well, honestly, no deliberate ploy at all. I guess I've always been someone that enjoys going after stuff. I'm a marketer's dream, right? You know, here's something shiny over here, get involved in this, it'll be exciting. And not knowing any better, I'm not the kind of person that does a lot of research into things either. I'll just take that opportunity. So I had a lot of friends who were doing engineering. I was studying maths and physics and Spanish and drama. So whilst I had the Spanish and drama arty bit, I also had this scientific engineering component. And I, went to a private school and, we were driven to apply to all these, top 10 universities. That was the general direction and instruction almost. Now, I was smart enough. I got the offers in and actually secured my place at Warwick University to study something like general engineering. But actually, it was through the interview process. I was having an interview with a professor at Durham University, and he had this bicycle in his study and asked me to explain how it worked. And I realized in that moment, I just didn't care. I loved the fact that it worked. I loved the fact that it gave you freedom. You could get you from A to B, and I love that aspect of it, but I didn't really care how it worked. I didn't care about designing it. I didn't care about designing improvements. So then my parents actually moved to Orkney and when I was 18, and it was through that move to Orkney then suddenly realizing there were other opportunities available. So I got involved in Orkney College and did an HNC in tourism, and that included areas of sustainability. So I got to sort of normal university application time of year and looked around at what I thought I could do and applied to do geology. I like the sound of earth sciences. I like the sound of geophysics. I obviously didn't look hard enough because I got there and realized I really didn't like rocks. But luckily, I got to uni doing geology, and after my first year, I was able to shift my degree onto a much more compelling earth sciences with geography degree. And what that gave me access to was that combination of the physical and natural environment with the human environment, with human built infrastructure and the way people interact with nature. And that was so much more interesting to me. So I did that, went to work for a company. I went through all that milk round stuff that you do at uni, which is you get sort of suckered into all these big companies. And I went and joined one of them and worked for them for about 9 months doing transport planning. Then through really the fact that my parents were in Orkney, they knew that Xodus was in Orkney as well. We had an office in Stromness. I thought, well, actually, I'll apply to join them. I didn't really know much about what Xodus did. And I got an interview, and it was through that interview, in the preparation for that, they asked me to prepare a presentation associated with environmental impact assessment and marine energy. And suddenly I realized, here's something to, I need to work out what marine energy was and what the energy sector was. And that was really my first introduction. My first role in Xodus was as a graduate environmental consultant. And through that, I did I started out doing a lot of chemical permitting, looking at the North Sea's oil and gas assets. Because I was in Orkney, there was a lot of, at a time when there was a lot of marine renewable energy going on, wave energy, tidal energy. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, got involved in some of that work, got involved in some GIS work, mapping viewpoints, mapping populations of, where sightings of marine mammals were, that kind of thing. And I got involved in some of the marine and some of the onshore planning activity as well. So that really introduced me to more stakeholder engagement type things as well. And because I could do all sorts of different things, but purely as a graduate, I just got a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's my experience with the energy sector, is that there's that real opportunity to do and see and understand lots of different things. I can't really say compared to other industries, but for me, that's the exciting thing, is that actually there's so much to learn, there's so much going on, and there's so much different stuff that's happening.
Absolutely. I think we talk about this in X Academy quite a lot. When we think about career mapping, I find it incredibly difficult. There is no way at all that I could have mapped my career, not even in the first 2 or 3 years, even after starting in the energy sector. I mentioned, oil and gas work and wave and tidal. I've worked on floating wind. I've worked on fixed offshore wind. I've worked on decommissioning projects. I've worked on carbon capture and storage. I've worked on hydrogen. It's introduced me to a massive network of people, all of whom have different skills, different perspectives. Sometimes there's tension, sometimes there's broad, widespread agreement. You just get something for everyone in the energy sector. And when we talk about that, okay, what does my future look like? What's my career in 5 years, 10 years time? I really try and focus on be open to what it could be. Don't narrow it. Don't try and put boundaries on it and try and get to a certain point. Just broaden it out, open those doors, and sort of just see where you end up.
I think that's brilliant. And that less than purposeful way in has opened up an incredible career for you. Before we dive into that, you talked about all of the different projects and you've mentioned X Academy, but before we dive into that, just like you to share your experience with us for what your uni days were like. What was it like as you'd moved away from home and you were starting to find who you were? What experience was that like for you?
Well, I had a fantastic time, and to be honest, I prioritized social stuff. I prioritized sport much more than I did my study work. And I think, I spent a lot of time at uni trying to figure things out for myself. I definitely wasn't openly gay. So I remember, I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but I let a friend know by email that I was gay, and he replied to that in a really well-meaning way. Replied to that saying, thanks very much for being open and honest with him. But if it's any consolation, he doesn't think I am. So I really didn't know how to take that. And it sort of actually created a bit more doubt in him. Am I or aren't I? Maybe this was, had I just applied some sort of scientific calculation to it? Despite being 19, 20, 21, I just still didn't understand what it meant. I hadn't been exposed to people who are gay or openly gay through school. I definitely didn't have any gay friends. I was trying to figure this out, and I went to one of the LGBT social group type things at uni. I got there. I didn't stay very long at all. I think I probably had one drink, and I just felt out of place. All I can describe is like a clique. It was a bunch of people that all seemed to know each other, or they all seemed to have clicked around something that they had in common. But to me, being part of that community, LGBT community, wasn't enough to. I just didn't see myself there. It didn't resonate with me. There's no one size fits all in terms of what being gay looks like, and I certainly didn't find that through uni, which was a shame. But I don't really know why.
And how do you think that has shaped your approach to inclusivity as you've got older, personally, professionally? Do you think that's that reaction of, well, I don't think you are, is quite stark, really, when you are going through these complex feelings? What did you take from that, and how have you moved forward with knowing how that made you feel?
Oh, there's a phrase that's being used quite a lot over the last few years, and I really like that phrase, actually. And it's go to where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And I think when it comes to being celebrated, you have to be seen and see yourself in that group of people. So I think that's really important, and that certainly shaped how I look to approach inclusion within Xodus and X Academy. But on a personal level, I still didn't understand what I wanted to be celebrated for. I didn't understand me. And I really focused on being life and soul of a party, being, taking every opportunity. And honestly, in Xodus, with my employer before Xodus, I certainly wasn't out for the first few years. That wasn't because I felt I couldn't be. I just didn't really know who I was. And that really, I suppose, has made it absolutely clear to me that there's no one size fits all in terms of what being gay looks like. And I think part of my issue when I was growing up is whenever I did see anything to do with the LGBT community, it was very, I guess, flamboyant, fabulous, all that stuff. And that wasn't me. I wasn't naturally that kind of person. And so then when you see that group of people, and then it's like, well, I don't really fit in with them. And then I saw my heterosexual friends, and I did fit in with them because I had a whole bunch of things that were in common with them. And we had a lot of fun together. But then I realized that I didn't resonate with them when they started flirting with each other. And, suddenly my mates go from, you have banter as mates, and then that becomes flirting with the girls, and it's a really simplistic way of looking at it. But I didn't understand it. I clearly didn't have the same feelings as them, but I clearly wasn't the same as this group of people over there that were celebrating being gay. I just didn't understand it. I think it had a profound impact on my mental health, and I don't think I addressed that for a very long time. And that was nothing to do with any maliciousness from anybody at all. It was just to do with me not understanding myself. But there were lots of things that people could have done around me, or organizations could have done around me, that would have made that easier, but it wasn't easy. So,
you said that you weren't openly gay. Going through that journey of coming out, for a better word, through in work or personally, you said you talked about those people that celebrated you. Did you find those people that you could be open and honest with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I started being open and honest with my uni friends latterly. Some of whom probably after I'd left uni, but definitely with them. And of course, some really close friends from school. But then, all of those people, once you leave uni, you're not with them day to day. When you're in full-time employment, or at least, even if it's part-time employment, you're with the same group of people day in, day out. And it was finally realizing, although I hadn't done anything, formal or audacious or whatever, it was realizing that actually all of my colleagues in Xodus fully accepted who I was. And, we started having conversations about, when are you going to go out on a date? Who have you met recently? All that kind of stuff. It just became normal. And it was through that I ended up actually meeting my now husband, just feeling that confidence grow from being supported by that family that I worked with. And so I met Remy, who is a vet. He's from France, but he was living in Orkney, seeing practice in Orkney. It was, completely changed his whole life and moved to a remote island from Paris. So I met him, and then only that Christmas before, where I'd had the confidence to come out to my parents. I think I was 28 at the time. This is such a cliche, embarrassing thing to say. They'd been around to mine on Christmas Day, and on Boxing Day, I was on my own. I was having a couple of beers, and Love Actually was on the TV. So I put the film on, and there's a scene in there, I can't remember exactly the words, but it's something along the lines of, if you can't say it at Christmas, when can you say it? And I, slightly tired and slightly fueled by a little bit of alcohol, I decided to come out to my parents by email. So
this is a theme.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I didn't learn from the first time, so I just went ahead and did it again 10 years later. But yeah, so I wrote this email, and they came back to me straight away. I think they were probably sitting in the same room typing emails back to me and comparing notes. I don't know. Good responses from both of them. My mum immediately linked it to some of the trouble I'd had at school with my mental health and stuff. But the clincher for me, and she said, P.S., because I've been around at the house the day before, P.S., we left the dog bed at your house. Mind if we come past and pick it up? And that was it. That was a beautiful, pointed closing to that email, which just took everything back to normality. And that was the nicest thing that could have happened. And that gave me the confidence to go and, meet Remy and go on a date and all that kind of stuff, which I hadn't really done.
I love that. Just like classic parent. Next, that feeling of like, and right, this is now, we're just going to get on with this. That's that done. And this is where we are now. And you were saying you were 28. So you joined Exodus. How long had you been at Exodus by the time you came out to your parents?
I think I joined Xodus when I was 24. So I'm going to say 4 years-ish. Yeah.
And so you were trying to work out who you are, dealing with potential, mental health, complex issues, but career trajectory. When you've always wanted to get ahead, you've always been ambitious. What do you think has driven you to be able to do that alongside everything else that's been going on for you?
I think my mum's been a big part of that, actually. Both my parents, obviously, but my dad was a stay-at-home husband. He looked after me, fed me, took me to school, all that kind of stuff. Mum was out working, and she's the main breadwinner, and she had these principles about her, which were things like, if you're paid a salary to do a job, it's your responsibility to make sure you get that job done. Make sure you do things right by other people. Make sure you don't put anyone else out. And she just had this fantastic work ethic. That sense of, ambition came from her. It wasn't ambition at all costs. It was pull out all the stops to make sure that things you do are good and they bring people along and all that kind of stuff. It was never a one-sided thing. It was never a kind of be ambitious but be on your own doing it. It was like, where can you do things that mean that you're working with other people and it becomes fun. So if on the one hand some of that ambition and that drive and motivation has come from people like my mum being quite inspirational, but then I think I probably have quite a short attention span as well. So I do like to move from one thing to the next, and I've been lucky, very lucky in Exodus that I've been allowed to do that. Most of the influences in my career have been strong females, apart from my dad, who was just that grounding rock, always there. So my mum, a couple of really strong-willed aunties, and then most of my bosses at Exodus have been female, and that's been a massive part of my career, I think. And of course, my husband Remy, so fantastic cheerleader, pushing me to do what we can. That means we can go on the next exciting holiday with a camper van, or we can live an audacious life with our puppy and that kind of thing. And then that community of people, whether that's the community of people from uni, from school, or from Exodus. Exodus is one of these companies where there are lots of people that have been there for a very long time, and they're there for a reason, because actually it feels like a family. It feels like a place, others from Exodus were at my wedding with Remy, and that was a really that wasn't because we spend lots of time together. That was because we've become friends. And I think it's a really important part of a career is if you can make friends with the people that you're working with. I think that just makes such a difference to whether you enjoy what you're doing or don't enjoy what you're doing. If you can enjoy just being and working alongside people that are fun to be around and that get you, but also where you can have those emotional times with them, and that's a support network that's there for you. And it's just all those aspects of being part of something. So yeah, lots and lots of different champions and cheerleaders, and in all sorts of ways. And it's everything from the exciting kind of triumphant type stuff to all the things that keep you grounded and pick you up when you're down as well. So
that wedding, it was quite the wedding, wasn't it? So we had a lovely time. When you're, when you put the laptop lid down and you get to fill your cup back up, what are the things that you do to allow you to work at that high level?
Getting a camper van a couple of years ago was a real game changer for that, to be honest. Even on a Friday late afternoon, early evening, just driving an hour or so away, sitting somewhere which often these places don't have very good phone signal or network coverage. So you end up sitting and starting a fire pit and just chilling out really and zoning out a bit. I've never been that bad at being able to sort of compartmentalize a bit and just put things away. But going for a weekend away with Remy or with friends, with the dog, going for walks with Walter, who's a corgi puppy, just amazing. Like, it's just good to get out in nature, whether that's in the UK or elsewhere. In my view, there's no one size fits all to being able to switch off or having to switch off, because actually I quite enjoy most of what I do. It's quite geeky. Maybe I'm a geek. Like, at the end of the day, in the energy sector, I'm always doing something which actually is having a positive impact on people somewhere, and it's actually quite motivating in itself, and that probably does give me energy. So I end up not really switching off. My favourite thing recently was hiring a canoe on Loch Lomond, and it was so serene, this flat water, like unheard of weather conditions for Scotland over the last couple of weeks, but just flat, calm waters, paddling along gently in this canoe, watching the birds fly around. There's hardly anyone there because we got there really early. It was just a stunning place.
I think for me, it's that energy has become actually mainstream. I think at the beginning of my career, it was just something that was there. Whereas now I think there is so much, you can't really open a newspaper without it being there. And I think that's definitely a shift. And if we want to be leaders in this environment, then it's something that we are engaging with all the time. But I also agree with you is that there's nothing better than nature. You need to get out there, you need to smell the flowers, you need to look at that blue sky, because actually you do need to turn your brain off. We're going to leave energy just there. Thank you for those insights. I think we'll probably discover a bit more about your career with our next couple of questions. So my next question is, what has been your greatest success?
I think my greatest success has to be X Academy. It's a not-for-profit energy transition organisation. It's creating jobs now that wouldn't exist otherwise. It's developing brand new people in the industry. It's reskilling people that have been in the energy sector or other industries for a long time. And everyone is working on real projects that actually have some sort of benefit or meaningful impact for the future. And one of those things that's come from an idea, working on that idea with multiple people, getting support, getting backing for it, getting funding in for it, then going through that whole startup phase once that funding is secured, convincing people to put their faith in me, in the team, in the organization, in the concept, the purpose, and then finding ways to grow it and then keep it going. And I think it's just, I guess, for me, what it would be like to be an entrepreneur, but in a very safe space and have a great impact on someone's life, a great, I guess, motivational, energy-giving impact on my own life. And it's just, it ticks so many boxes. And we won 3 awards last year. So I think that's, it's got some industry recognition that demonstrate that it's a success as well.
And how important is it as a leader? So you are the managing director of X Academy, 3 times award-winning X Academy. How important is it to you now that you are seen as a leader, but also as a gay man?
It's very important that I am seen as both of those things. And I think, back to that phrase I said before, be where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And I think the fact that I have had successes, I am a leader, and I'm a gay man, means that people, wherever they are, who come across me, can see that I am being celebrated for who I am. And if the thing that they find in common with me is the way they think about problems, or the thing they find in common with me is that they are also gay or male or in their late 30s or whatever that happens to be, it's something that is part of who I am and can be celebrated and can be successful.
So you talked about, not being exclusive and that you want to be inclusive. What are you doing as the MD of X Academy to be seen to be being inclusive?
Great question. I think the word seen is exactly right as well. We often get caught in the trap of saying things, and what's really important to me, is that idea of show, don't tell. We want to be seen that we are inclusive, and that threaded through all of our sort of marketing stuff right from the outset. But actually, before that was in the discussions that I had with our initial founders. We want this to be an inclusive environment, and in every conversation, every bit of activity that we did, when we were targeting recruits, when we were looking at who would join the team to lead it, conversations I had with recruiters, with HR teams, internal, external, all of them included this idea that we want this to be an inclusive environment where anyone can come into X Academy and find their route through to long-term careers in the energy sector. And we had to go out of our way to make it really, really obvious, to make sure that everyone did see that that's what we were trying to do. And that includes, earlier this year I was asked to do a talk at the Offshore Energies UK annual HSE conference, and being seen there, I talked about my sexuality, I talked about inclusivity, I talked about being free from judgment, all that kind of stuff, and how that translates throughout society, throughout the work that we do, throughout the organisation of X Academy. It's only by being seen to be inclusive that we will be able to attract people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And whether that's from a privileged background or from a disadvantaged background, whether it's someone from the LGBT community or someone who has some sort of disability, it doesn't really matter. We have to make sure that we are obviously inclusive to all of those groups of people, and we celebrate all of them.
I think your passion for this clearly shines through. And I think what you've tried to do is admirable from the outset, having that this is where we want to be, this is where we're going, and keep course correcting to make sure that that is what you deliver. And I can definitely see why you have chosen X Academy as your greatest success. And I think for me, it's on this trajectory to keep going. So fingers crossed. On the opposite side of success, what do you think your biggest challenge has been to date?
I don't feel like I've ever failed. Not really. But that's not an arrogant thing to say.
That must be nice for some.
And I think you just mentioned there, even with X Academy, like the ability to keep course correcting. And I think throughout my career, I've been able to try things out. I've been put into leadership positions which were above my level of experience in terms of, I hadn't done it before. And I've tried things, they haven't worked as well, but also I've had the ongoing support, the network around me, the friends, the relationships within the team and with clients that have enabled us to do that course correction and to keep improving things. And I think there's a mindset piece to this, but there's also a context, that ability to, that freedom to fail, the safety net that even is just as much as, your line manager saying, look, it's all going to be fine. Let's get after this, see where it takes us. Any problems that arise along the way, we'll fix it. If I look back at some of those challenges, the one that was which had the most odds stacked against it, I think, was in 2018. I took over we revamped our offshore wind capability. Essentially, we created a new division called the Renewables Division in Xodus. Went from essentially a year before that saying, we did some strategy work and we said, right, we're too late to the offshore wind party. And then here we are several years on and we're a core part of that, international offshore winds community. But the biggest challenge was, how do you encourage people who know a huge amount about offshore wind to come and join a company that has very limited track record in offshore wind? And at that time, in 2018, those individuals were still faced with plenty of opportunities from pure play renewables consultancies, offshore wind developers with growing teams. And it was such a tough ask. And the main thing I can put it down to was me being quite willing to be vulnerable around, well, here's a space that is yours to take forward. I didn't know how all the answers. And what I was trying to do was give people platforms to be able to thrive and succeed in the areas that they knew a lot about. Now, there's all sorts of things that are good and bad about the approach that I took. And there's so much none of that would have happened if we hadn't worked on how to rebrand Exodus, and there's so much in that space. Back then we changed our vision. So there's a lot of stuff that all went into that, but ultimately it was, how can you give some people the space and the freedom that you've had in the past to be able to succeed? And so me addressing my biggest challenge was actually applying the same opportunity that I'd had in the past, and that was that freedom to fail and the freedom to get after stuff. That
piece for me is you were honest, authentic, truthful. You weren't putting something out that was smoke and mirrors. It was you saying that this is an opportunity, let's turn it into something. And that's quite brave when you are leading something. So where do you think we are as an industry, as a society, with regards to supporting the LGBTQ plus community?
That's a great question. I think nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? Because society changes all the time. And, if I look back on when I was a teenager, for example, like you rarely saw a gay character on TV. I certainly didn't see any gay characters that I resonated with, because if there was a gay character, that was their thing. That was why they were a character in that particular show. Now, what we're seeing now is that there are gay characters and it's just a nothing. That's just who they are. And that is a massive, massive difference. And I think it's really important to appreciate the scale of difference in that attitude. One, the former being, if I'm gay, that's who I need to look like, and that's I'm going to be made an example of. Or I'm gay, so what? I'll be in a relationship with a man or a woman if you're female. And we see that change in all sorts of parts of life, and whether that's the Pride events, which have become a big family day out for a lot of people, or in how we talk about inclusion within the industry. And I think we do talk about inclusion more than we talk about diversity. And I think that's really, really important as well, because you're not trying to single people out and say you're different, but also you're not trying to avoid celebrating those differences. You're just saying, actually, everyone's welcome, no matter who you are, come in and we'll celebrate you. And that's really, really important.
I love that. I think it's that you've got to see it to be it. And, it's welcoming everyone in, it's elevating everyone and allowing people to be who they are and be the best they can be. I'm going to leave challenges there, and I'm going to move on to my final and last question, and that is, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it's really liberating now being able to talk about my experiences as an openly gay man, and it's not been that long since I was able to do that. But honestly, that I use the word liberating deliberately, the freedom it gave me as soon as I started talking about it. Even in the last couple of years, we did some workshops in Exodus, and I plucked up the courage to bring up this idea that, even up until the last, couple of years ago, I was struggling to correct people that were assuming I was married to a woman. I wasn't talking about it. Now I'm talking about it. I feel so much more happy that actually it's fine and no one bats an eyelid and it's all cool. And so if I could travel back in time, I'd love to tell Idiot Pete, you're finding the world so uncertain and scary. You don't understand what's going on. You don't understand your own feelings. The world is a scary place. There's a lot of challenge out there, but you're not going to have to do it alone. And therefore, we'll all be fine.
Pete, thank you so much for wearing your heart on your sleeve and speaking so candidly about your personal journey, and also for championing the culture we have at Exodus. Your story is inspiring, and I'm so grateful to you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed the chat, and scary.
Not at all. You did an absolutely brilliant job. I will leave you now to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on this special Pride edition of Tales of the Extraordinary. If you enjoyed this, you can find our earlier episodes on our YouTube channel. That's all for now. Until next time, take care.
Tales of the Extraordinary is brought to you by the Exodus Empowering the Energy Industry team and produced by The Big Partnership.